Over the past few years, I've gotten a lot of requests to make videos talking about specific creepy stories and mysteries. And while there definitely are a lot of things that I'd like to eventually talk about in extreme depth, I think it would be fun in the meantime to put out a video series explaining this chart, which lists out many of the internet's most iconic scary stories. This list was compiled by the Reddit user AvargSkeletorium, and the stories listed are loosely sorted from popular to obscure. I'm going to give a brief overview of what each story is about, and what I could find out about the story's creators and where it came from. These won't be as in-depth as my usual, more focused content, but having brief summaries of the stories might be helpful for you guys in deciding which stories you want to learn about, and also helpful for me, as it will help me in having a basic knowledge starting point for whenever I want to do my own deeper dive into these things. Plus, I've always wanted to do a video like this, ever since 2020 when I first saw the Mishkaz video about the Super Mario 64 iceberg. I think he actually watches my videos, so hi! A creepypasta is basically the internet's version of a scary story. When the word creepypasta first started becoming popular as a word, it was mainly used to refer to a specific piece of text, usually a short story or a description of a character, that people would rapidly spread around the internet by copying and pasting it everywhere. The word creepypasta comes from the older internet word copypasta, which refers much more broadly to any piece of text that would get shared around, hence the name copy-paste-a. There are a lot of different styles to these creepypastas, but there are a few things that many of the popular ones have in common. For one thing, they often have a creepy image tied with the story, and these images often become more well-known than the stories themselves. Also, a lot of these stories and images were first posted anonymously to a message board like 4chan or to the Creepypasta wiki under some kind of throwaway username, without any easy way to learn about the author. So a lot of these stories have a vibe of seeming like they just came out of nowhere, which makes them more mysterious. Many of them are deliberately written in a way to make the reader wonder whether or not this might actually be a true story. So the fact that the authors can't always be tracked down only adds to the mystery. Over time, the word creepypasta started being used almost as a blanket term for almost anything creepy that was made on the internet, so the definition is a lot more nebulous nowadays. But in most cases, it still usually refers to a story, or at least a specific character or concept. Now, before we get into the chart, there are two quick warnings I want to give first. First, a content warning. Since these are horror stories, a lot of sensitive and uncomfortable topics do come up, including the ones listed on screen right now. I won't be mentioning any of these topics unless I have to give the basic overview of the entry, and when these topics do come up, I will not be going into details about them, and I won't be making any jokes or attempts at humor during those parts either. But they will be mentioned in some of the entries, so I advise your discretion, viewer. The final note I want to mention is that because a lot of the items on the chart are stories, and many of these stories are essentially pieces of creative writing, I don't want this video to be used as a total substitute for actually reading them if any of them are interesting to you. So, for many of the stories mentioned, I won't be giving complete summaries, and I'll try to avoid spoiling too much. But there are still a number of cases where I will need to spoil some things, mainly in cases where I can't otherwise make a point about something, or at least make it clear why the story is notable, which is kind of the purpose of me making this video. But I'll try to keep that to a minimum, and even in those cases, I do still recommend reading the originals if they catch your attention. Often, the selling point is the atmosphere and presentation, regardless of whether you know what's going to happen. My goal with this video is to provide an overview of the history and significance of many of the most iconic scary stories on the internet, and possibly inspire you to dig even deeper into the ones that you might want to check out further. So, in the description, I'm including links to where you can experience all the stories I'm talking about. These will also be listed alongside specific content warnings for which sensitive topics are referenced in which story. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin with Tier 1, the section containing the most famous creepypastas. Slender Man. The very first creepypasta we're talking about is arguably the face of creepypasta in general. The Slender Man is a little different from an ordinary creepypasta, in that it's not so much referring to a specific story, but rather a character that has been the subject of many different stories and legends on the internet. It began on June 8th, 2009. A thread was created on the forums of somethingawful.com in which the OP encouraged other users on the site to create paranormal images. On June 10th, the user Victor Surge shared 2 images of his own that changed the internet forever. The images both showed a very tall man wearing a suit, with pale skin and seemingly no face. The man is surrounded by children in both photos, and in the second photo especially, he seems to have strange limbs like tentacles. The images also came with captions, explaining that the man in the photo is known as the Slender Man, and that sightings of him are associated with disappearing children, local buildings burning down, and people being forced to commit murder, with the man causing them to feel both horrified and comforted at the same time. Both photos are dated to the 80s and are credited to photographers who went missing after the photos were taken. The post was well received in the thread, so Victor Surge made a few more posts expanding on the premise and with longer stories to accompany the pictures. In addition to fires and disappearing children, the Slender Man is also associated with film defects, power outages, mental hospitals, fog, and most notably, the woods. The most harrowing story described how 22 bodies were found on tree branches. Their internal organs were still inside them, but wrapped in clear bags. The man also seems to have some sort of shape-shifting properties, as its tentacles can be incredibly long and spider-like in some cases, or completely absent in others. It can even change the shape of its head to give off the appearance of having a face at times, but always lacks true eyes. The final post that Victor Surge made that day showed that the Slender Man was targeting him next for looking at his pictures, saying it doesn't want to be known about. After this, the thread basically just became the Slender Man thread, and almost all other posts from that point on were just other users making their own contributions to the Slender Man lore. The history that developed was that the Slender Man is an ancient creature that has existed since the dawn of humanity, and that references to him can be found in fairy tales, old woodcuts, and even cave paintings and hieroglyphs from ancient Egypt. In some places and time periods, he was known by other names, such as the Tall Man, and the different stories about him over time variably referred to him as an angel or a fairy, with disagreement about its motives, but he was always described as a malevolent being who takes children and psychologically torments adults, if it doesn't just kill them. It's often standing just at the edge of sight, barely visible behind a tree, or hidden behind a dense fog. At this point, the Slender Man had already taken on a life of its own within the Something Awful community, but it began to spread outside Something Awful on June 18th, when the user C. Gars made his own contribution, explaining how the post reminded him of a failed student film that his college friend Alex was working on, titled Marble Hornets. Alex had suddenly cancelled the film with no explanation, started avoiding everyone, and got rid of the footage by giving all the tapes to the user. This was the beginning of the Marble Hornets YouTube series, which is where Slender Man really exploded in popularity. Many other Slender Man video series were made after this, including Everyman Hybrid, Tribe 12, and Dark Harvest, but Marble Hornets was always the most popular, and the one that shaped the mainstream perception of Slender Man the most. The Marble Hornets' interpretation of the character didn't do anything with the shape-shifting angle, but it did do a lot to explore the film defects and the psychological impact that Slender Man has on its victims. The character of Alex is showcased as someone who slowly lost his mind because of the monster, and how it caused him to obsessively film himself and scribble creepy sketches and warnings about it. In 2012, the game developer Agent Parsec made a game based on the Marble Hornets version of Slender Man, and that game became Slender the 8 Pages. The game was a massive success and caused Slender Man to become even more mainstream online, especially because this was during the era when some of the most popular content on YouTube was scare cam reactions to horror content from YouTubers like PewDiePie and Tobuscus. The Slender Man character did receive a lot of infamy in May 2014, after an incident in Wisconsin where two 12-year-old girls tried to kill their friend by stabbing her 19 times because they thought that the Slender Man would hurt their families if they didn't offer a sacrifice to him. Fortunately, the victim, Peyton Leitner, survived, but not surprisingly, the whole incident kinda soured the public's perception of Slender Man, as well as internet creepypasta in general. And coincidentally, Marble Hornets was ending anyway. The final episode was posted less than a month after the stabbing, so interest just started declining after that. Over a decade later, Slender Man definitely doesn't come up as often anymore, but it's still pretty relevant as one of the de facto mascots of the creepypasta world. In my mind, the original Something Awful thread is a prime example of how the internet can come together and collectively create something cool, a character and surrounding lore in this case. And I mean, yeah, Victor Surge was the one who started it, but even his own posts left a lot open to interpretation. It was the following posts and videos from other people who all expanded on the idea and invented their own unique ideas of what else this thing could be. And I think that's kind of awesome. Now, the creator of the Iceberg decided to also list Marble Hornets as a separate entry in the same tier, so now is a good time to talk a bit more about that. The first chunk of the series follows the user, Jay, going through the tapes he got from Alex. It's very much a found footage type of vibe at first, as we see various behind-the-scenes clips of the movie showing Alex losing his mind and becoming increasingly paranoid, mixed in with sightings of the Slender Man. Though the series never uses the phrase Slender Man, and the monster is instead referred to as the Operator. The series never explores the origins or the motives of the Operator itself, instead focusing more on how its victims are psychologically affected by it. The series is especially focused on the sickness, where someone who's being targeted by the Slender Man suffers from nosebleeds and paranoia and coughing up blood, and worst of all, periods of amnesia during which they turn into strange, more hostile versions of themselves, possibly split personalities with ambiguous motives. And also, it's apparently contagious. So if one person who's being targeted gets too close to someone else, those people might become targets as well. Interestingly, Jay posting his videos awakens the wrath of another YouTube channel called To The Ark, which seems to be run by one or more of the people who were broken by the Operator. And the channel frequently responds to Jay's videos with threatening messages and strange codes. Eventually, the weird YouTuber attacks Jay directly, and the series transitions from being simple, found footage content into a more action-packed thriller, filled with betrayals and psychological breakdowns. The series is actually pretty long and elaborate for a creepypasta thing, and I won't spoil the ending, but the series eventually follows Jay teaming up with Tim, another former cast member for the movie, and the pair work together to stop Alex, whose plan to tie up the film's loose ends is to kill everyone that came into contact with it, so that the sickness can't spread anymore. What a jerk. Eyeless Jack. This is an example of something that happened a lot in the creepypasta community, where an image became popular on its own, and then stories and characterizations based on that image came later. The Eyeless Jack character began with an image that was created by the artist Pirate Cashew, and then posted DeviantArt by their friend K.T.B. on November 19, 2009. The image was posted under the title, "You awake?" and shows a view from someone in bed looking up toward the ceiling, with a masked figure looming over them, the only clearly visible features being two large, gaping black holes where its eyes should be. The image became popular in June 2010 when it was shared to 4chan and started being spread everywhere. It's not clear to me where the name Eyeless Jack first came from, but it was being used at least as far back as 2011 for Comic Kit's webcomic Pasta Monsters, which was about a universe where all the popular creepypasta monsters and some original characters live together in the same world. Kind of a fun relic of the time, honestly. Anyway, the most well-known story based on the image was written in February 2012 by Azel5000. This short story describes the person as someone who wears a black hood and a blue mask, with a mysterious black substance dripping from its eye holes. The story is told from the perspective of a person named Mitch, and tells how the person tries to surgically remove his internal organs while he's asleep, and also kills Mitch's brother. The story ends with Mitch finding a piece of his stolen kidney on the floor, looking like someone had been eating it. In 2013, another author, Mish, wrote their own tale about the creature's origins. The creature was originally a student named Jack Nichols, who was lured into the woods by a cult to be used as some sort of human sacrifice, during which his eyes were removed and had a tar-like substance poured into their sockets. The sacrifice went wrong somehow, and Jack became the murderous monster that he is now. The author of the original story liked Mish's story, and decided to make it canon to his own interpretation of the story, though he changed Jack's last name to Nyrus, and identified Jack as a 19-year-old American man, and established that Jack has no memory of his human life before the cult incident. Now, I do want to note, I'm trying not to editorialize too much, because I imagine that the people watching my videos are here more so for information, rather than listening to me blather on about my opinions. But I do feel I'd be remiss if I don't mention that this category of creepypasta, where a story was written based on an already popular image, almost never works out for me, personally. It always feels like the community accepted a story as canon to an image just because it was the first story that anyone cooked up for it, and that often means it's the one that feels sorta rushed and not very well thought out. And I kinda feel like that's the case with this one, more so with the original story than Mish's one. I don't want it to sound like I'm being too hard on the author, because for one thing, I do have a massive amount of respect for anyone who puts out almost any creative work, regardless of its perceived quality. And in this case, even the author himself isn't exactly proud of it. He actually wrote a pretty lengthy post back in 2024 apologizing for the story, saying he was 12 when he wrote it, and that writing the story is one of his life's biggest regrets. In my experience, the people serious enough to write a truly interesting and well-done story are usually serious enough that they'll also create their own artwork or some other creation for the story, rather than using one that someone else made. All this to say, this is just one genre of internet horror that I usually can't recommend. But let's move on from Eyeless Jack and talk about a different Jack, a laughing one. Personally, my favorite Jack is one of the candle variety.
I'm gonna need more rope.
Laughing Jack is a creepypasta character created by the DeviantArt user Snuffbomb, who, alongside a story, posted several photos of himself cosplaying his own character on March 3rd, 2013. Okay, food for thought. Does it count as a cosplay if the character is one you're currently in the process of creating, and you're partly dressing up as him as a model for the story, and these are the first images that anyone's ever seen of the design? Does it not only count as a cosplay if it's a pre-existing character? I don't know, I just feel like I'm misusing the word. The original story follows a single mother and her 5-year-old son James as Laughing Jack stalks them, seeming friendly at first before attacking James and tricking the mother into finally killing him. In December, the author also wrote an origin story for Laughing Jack, which revealed that Jack was created by the wishes of a boy named Isaac, who had no friends and was living with abusive parents. Jack was created by Isaac's guardian angel so that he would have a friend. Jack was originally an ordinary, colorful clown with a somewhat childlike mentality, who was confined to a wooden box as a jack-in-the-box until whenever Isaac would want to play with him. However, it slowly becomes obvious that there was a reason why Isaac didn't have any friends before, because at one point, he makes Jack kill the neighbor's pet cat. After that, Isaac is sent away to a boarding school, and Jack is left behind, trapped in the box for years, as his colors slowly fade and his once happy emotions become numb. Eventually, Isaac returns as an adult, and Isaac has grown up to become an insane, murdering rapist. Isaac has forgotten about Jack at this point, but Jack is somehow still able to watch from his wooden box as Isaac brings people to his home and tortures them, causing Jack to think that murder and pain are just part of some twisted game that people play for fun, and he feels jealous of Isaac's quote-unquote new friends. After a while, Isaac accidentally releases Laughing Jack again, so Jack brutally kills Isaac, announcing that he plans to spread his friendship to all the lonely kids of the world. When the police find Isaac's body, they note that his face looks almost happy. I don't completely hate the concept of the story. I do think that there's storytelling potential in the premise of a good-natured, somewhat childlike personality turning to the dark side because of the actions of the people around them. But this story is unnecessarily graphic, with excessive descriptions of torture and even sexual violence, so it's hard for me to recommend the story. Zalgo. Before we move on, I want to briefly talk about another creepy internet icon, Zalgo. It's not included as an entry on the Iceberg, but I'm talking about it anyway since it's mentioned in the next entry, and it is a pretty well-known part of creepypasta culture anyway. Zalgo is a concept created in mid-2004 by the Something Awful user Shmorky. It started with Shmorky making these edits of popular comics, where the name Zalgo is mentioned as some mysterious creature, possibly a deity or eldritch abomination, and was associated with this special Unicode effect where ordinary letters are combined with other characters to make this strange, distorted vibe. To this day, this style of text is known as Zalgo text. There isn't any canonical explanation for who or what Zalgo actually is. According to Shmorky, he just made it up completely, and his only thought about what it is that Zalgo is something horrible that's coming, and coming soon. So, naturally, a lot of the fan stories about Zalgo are based around the idea of it being a Lovecraftian monster with vague but mostly evil purposes. And that's about as far as public consensus goes. I often see Zalgo associated with the Slender Man, I guess because both are mysterious beings with ambiguous motives that supposedly have existed since ancient times. But in my opinion, there's not much else that's interesting about Zalgo other than the edgy text.